Oh, cool. Hey, Andy, are we ready?
Let me admit everyone else that's in the waiting room and disable that.
Okay.
We just had a couple more join. Let those guys get in the queue.
Okay.
Okay, Susan, I think we are ready.
Okay, and does it look like we have a quorum? Just out of curiosity, if you happen to notice.
Yeah, let me quickly run through and check that while
Okay.
we get going here. And I'm
Okay.
happy to move the slides as we need them.
Sounds good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here on this beautiful, somewhat rainy Thursday if you're around the coast. My name is Susan Chambers. I'm chair of OPAC for another meeting or so. It's Thursday, January 29th, and I'll call the meeting to order. Just to get a few things out of the way first, recordings of the council's meetings are available on YouTube and the OPAC playlist. Meeting materials for today's meetings are publicly available on the OregonOcean.info website. And if you're joining us via Zoom, which we all are, please use the chat to let us know if you'd like to make public comment. Let's see. Okay. During the 3:45 PM public comment period. 3 minutes for public testimony is typical. We may reduce that based on the number of comments, but I think we'll probably be okay. Oh yeah, OPAC members, please rename yourselves with a first and last name so we can identify you and bring you forward at your opportunity to speak. That goes for members of the public as well, so we know who you are. And thank you for being here today. Did I miss anything, Andy, that we need to run through? You know, general Zoom rules, keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking, things like that.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So we'll go through a roll call of, or let's see, do we need to review the agenda first?
We can do either. I
Okay.
flashed this up just to remind everyone
Yeah.
the order of the agenda items here.
Okay. Yep. Today we're focused on offshore wind. So we have a couple major things related to that. And also have to review the last meeting summary. And what else? Talk about the next meeting coming up and elections. So let's get into member introductions. As I said, my name is Susan Chambers. I'm the chair. I represent South Coast Fisheries, commercial fisheries. And we'll just go down the screen in order. So Tara.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. Had trouble getting off mute, in all these years, there's always something. I am the vice chair, as Susan said, and I represent Coastal Conservation, and at least the vice chair for one more meeting here. And I apologize, I'm going to stay off video for a few minutes while I eat my much belated lunch, and I'll pass it to Kyle.
And I think Kyle and John Allen and Fran Recht couldn't be here today. So
Nick.
Nick.
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I'm a commercial fisherman. I have an 84-foot, 200-ton trawler, the Carter John, fish the Dungeness crab and shrimp, but I'm here representing the International Portuguese Bay.
Thank you, Nick. Margaret, are you on here today?
I think she was going to be available, but I do not see her on our participant list yet.
Okay. Well, we might come back to Margaret. I'll go to Richard Heap if he is on here today.
I do not see Richard.
Okay. We have a charter and sport fishing from the North Coast seat open. So if you guys know of anybody who would like to apply for that seat, we can talk about that later or reach out to Andy. It's always better when we get a full OPAC, so we'd like to get that filled. Duncan Berry, you are new. We missed you last time, so if you want to introduce yourself a little bit and give us a little bit more information about you, that would be great.
Well, thank you, Susan. I have previously sent out a letter of introduction, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I hail from the Lower Salmon River watershed inside the UNESCO Biosphere region at Cascade Head. And I am I see that I'm public at large, but I am also representing the community of the biosphere here. I've started and run a series of medium to large scale businesses for the past 35 years before coming home to the coast. I worked on the Cascade Head Marine Reserve community team where I became familiar with the work of OPAC. But I now split my time between co-directing the Cascade Head Biosphere Collaborative as a UNESCO site and working in my studio creating large-scale oceanic artwork for exhibition and advocacy, the Gyotaku technique. I've also spent many years working in communications and education and hope that my skill set in these areas can be useful over time to OPAC in telling the story more broadly of the remarkable work that this body's been doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Duncan. I've heard about your artwork, and at some point in the future, I want to corner you and talk more about art.
Love that.
Joe Liebezeit, I know you're on here somewhere.
I'm here. Hey, everybody. My name is Joe Liebezeit. I'm the statewide conservation rep on OPAC. It's my second term starting up. And my day job, I'm the statewide conservation director for the Bird Alliance of Oregon. I'm based here in Portland. And yeah, I think we pass it next to Amelia, unless you want to say anything about the Coos Curry Douglas representative, Susan.
Yeah, that still is needed to be filled, and I think former OPAC member Jamie Faraday was working on that too, but we might find out more about that later. But yeah, otherwise, Amelia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amelia O'Connor. I am the non-fishing recreation representative. Also an avid surfer and a Central Coast resident with background in biology. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you, Amelia. Mark Quayla, are you on here today? I can't remember.
I do not see Mark,
Did-
but I think he did say that he had a conflict today.
Okay. Okay. Is up to that. Fran is absent today too. She had a conflict. We're also looking for a commercial ocean member for the North Coast. So if you know of anybody there as well, please let them know about OPAC and that we'd like to get someone with their experience on OPAC and you know, reach out to Andy or somebody on OPAC and we can make that happen. And next we have ex officio members, Ray Monroe.
Good afternoon. I'm Ray Monroe and I'm representing small ports and local governments.
Thank you, Ray. Laurel, are you on today?
I do not see Laurel.
Okay. Justin Ainsworth with ODF&W.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Justin Ainsworth with ODF&W, and I manage the Marine Resources Program. Our program is responsible for fisheries and resource management and policy development and research on all things ocean, including estuaries. Hello.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Karina Nielsen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Karina Nielsen. I'm director of the Oregon Sea Grant Program based at OSU. And I'm also a professor of practice here with background in marine ecology.
Great. Ryan, I think, is he on here? Or you said he was going to be a little bit late?
He said he was going to be a little bit late, but he will
That's
be
it.
joining.
Okay. Natalia.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Natalia Strunatka, Territorial Specialist, Department of State Lands.
Awesome. Thank you. Chandra with the Governor's Office. Thought I heard you.
Afternoon, Chandra Ferrari, a Natural
Okay.
Resources Policy Advisor with the Governor's Office. Apologies,
Okay.
operating out of the car today.
Yep. No, thanks for being here. We know you're busy. John Allen, I don't
He
think
had a conflict, and so
that's
he
right.
excused absence. And Alexis and Alex are not going to be here as well.
Okay. And
And Lisa will be in and out today. She's had some conflicting meetings, so she said she was going to be a little bit late and in and out. So she will
Okay.
be here as much as she can.
okay. Steve Shipsey, is he here today?
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Shipsey from the Department of Justice, and I'm counsel to the council.
Thank you, Steve. Chris Wall.
Hi, everyone. Chris Wall with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management.
Great. Thank you very much. That goes through our OPAC roster. I do want to note that we also have Leanne Thompson here. And I know, Andy, you just said.
Yeah, let me introduce Leanne for the group, if I may.
Thank you.
And for the record, I'm Andy Lanier. I'm staff for the council, Marine Affairs Coordinator at DLCD. And Leanne has been designated the liaison to OPAC and all of the things that I'm working on in the marine and ocean policy realm. And she is able to join us today. So I would like to allow her to say a few words, introduce herself, and
Sure.
yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm Leanne Thompson. I'm a Clatsop County Commissioner. I live between the Cape Falcon Marine Reserves and Oswald West State Forest in Clatsop County, about a quarter mile north of the Tillamook County line. And I have a good neighbor on the call whom I won't identify, but I'm always grateful to see him here. I'd say that in ocean matters, I'm very concerned about the three-legged stool of a healthy economy, a healthy planet, and healthy people. Because if we're not all in this together, looking at all those things, I think we're headed for disaster. So I am delighted to be here. Thanks.
Great. Welcome. Glad to have you here. And I did see that Margaret Corvey just joined. So Margaret, do you want to say something real quick and say hello?
I do not have anything to say. I just wanted to let you guys know I was here and be on the roll call officially.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Margaret. Andy, is there anybody else here that?
Nope.
Nope.
There are
Okay.
members of the public, but
Right.
no other council members for introduction.
Okay. Or any agency members that we needed to.
Actually, I would like to introduce Maya Fizel. She is a new fellow working with us in DLCD, and she is a West Coast Ocean Alliance fellow. And her project is going to be centered around ocean resource and use data and helping us to wrap our arms around that again, since it's been a little while and we've had a number of processes that have generated inventories. And so Maya's going to help us get all that stuff organized and get that out to the public again and as user-friendly a way as we possibly can.
That's great. Welcome, Maya. Do you want to say a few words or?
Yeah, good to see everybody. Andy pretty much summarized what I'm going to be doing for the next year at DLCD. So hopefully you all will be seeing a little bit more of me as the year goes on, hearing about the data organization and projects that I'll be working on. Just a little background about me. I recently completed a PhD at Oregon State University with Bruce Mankey. And I see a few familiar faces at the council today. So it's good to see everybody.
Great. Great. Well, welcome. Okay, moving on to review and approval of the draft meeting summary. I think, Andy, you sent this out.
Yes, I did. And I will also put a link in the chat if you don't want to use your cell phone to scan that little QR code.
Let's see. Okay, and I think when I read through it, I didn't have any questions. But okay, but it's there in the chat if you want to read through it real quick.
And Susan, I believe we do have a quorum now. with Margaret joining. Steve,
Good,
can you
thank you.
confirm that with me?
I forgot to ask. Okay. Okay, so if we want to take a minute to read through it, or if anybody has already read it and has a motion to approve it or add changes, we are open to that. Please raise your hand, and I think the raise hand feature is under React. No, it's under, where is it? It moved again.
I think it is under reaction, Susan, but I see a different version since I'm a host of the meeting.
Okay, there we go.
today,
Yes,
so-
it is under reactions. Yep.
It looks like Nick has his hand raised.
Okay.
No, I just figured out how to turn it on. All right, I'm taking it down.
Perfect.
Okay. It's a good test. Okay, I think some of us are still reading, so I'll be right back in just a second. I just have to open the door real quick.
Andy, while Susan, oh, there she's back. I was going to ask, Duncan and I were not at the last meeting, so assume we should not vote to approve the summary. Does that make a problem for quorum for approving the summary? I just wanted to.
Well, you can confirm you were absent, which is documented on the
Great,
file.
I will do
and
that.
So
Perfect.
you can still say yes as a part of the consensus process.
Great.
So at this point, we are looking for a motion if the council is ready, or if we'd like, we can allow more time and move forward and come back to this. But
Yeah. Although I don't know, the last time we did that, I totally forgot about it, so that might be a little scary. But if nobody wants to, Joe.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting and move forward.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
I'll
And-
second that motion.
Thank you. Okay, by consensus, either say aye or add a thumbs up or
Aye.
aye.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share for a sec so I can see
Okay.
everyone, because when I'm sharing my screen, that is a
You
challenge.
can't, yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing nothing but thumbs up.
Yep. Same here.
So I will count that as consensus.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. And what do we have next?
Sec, I'll pull the slide up.
I think our exec committee planning discussion.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so did you want to put that on the screen, Andy, or no? Okay. So, for the OPAC Executive Committee Planning, I will need to step down as chair at the next meeting. because my term will expire in June, I think. So April will be April. Yeah, April will be my last meeting as chair. If we don't get somebody to fill my seat, I can still serve on OPAC. I've talked to 2 people to see if we can get somebody from the South Coast Fisheries to fill my seat. But we haven't gotten through that process yet. So, and Tara, you have mentioned needing to step back due to changes in your work. I don't know if that is still the case or if you want to talk about that more or just let it go at that. But we have the current executive committee is chair, vice chair, Joe Liebezeit, Amelia, Karina, and Chandra Ferrari from the governor's office, or the governor's office, if somebody else is there. So, yeah. So Andy, what do we need to do for the next meeting?
Well, the last time we had executive committee appointments, there was a conversation afterwards that we wanted to be a little bit more proactive and give people a little bit more time to consider their willingness and ability to serve. And so that is why we are not trying to actually take action on this today.
Okay.
And I believe we have the flexibility to put some scaffolding on a process that has been very informal in the past. So I think that's the reason why the agenda item is on here today. I think the council has the ability to, for example, let us know ahead of time whether or not they are interested and willing to serve, so that before the April meeting, there may be a slate of options for us to consider.
Okay. Joe.
Yeah, it would be great to get either now or some type of short write-up on the time commitment involved in what it takes to be the chair and I guess vice chair as well, for just so we could factor that into consideration, you know, the capacity issue of that role.
Right. Andy, I thought, weren't those roles, it's been a while since I've read the OPAC handbook that I got when I first joined OPAC. Weren't those delineated in that packet of information?
They were, and actually in October, I gave a brief orientation to the
Okay.
council on the role of the executive committee.
Yeah.
And so the duties are somewhat scaled by position, right? The chair has a little bit more responsibility. The vice chair slightly less, although Tara and Susan have worked very closely together with me as staff to do all of the administrative tasks associated with keeping OPAC going. So the commitment is, you know, you are in a leadership role during the meetings, and when you're not in meetings, there may be requests for consideration that come via the communities for consideration on something like a letter, and the executive committee would be receiving those. They would be, if they need to respond quickly, you know, they would work to help me set up and schedule a meeting. They might have a discussion, you know, at that meeting about how the council will proceed. But I would say it's a relatively limited role outside of actual, you know, spending time at the meetings. And there's just a little bit more focus on members as they have helped to set the agenda and work to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly. Susan and Tara, please provide additional context from your recent experience, and that may be helpful.
Yeah. That's mostly it. I know sometimes it has been difficult to get letters done in a timely fashion. You know, my other work life has, you know, played a role in that a couple of times, but other times we've been able to get letters done quickly and it hasn't taken so much time outside of the actual meeting. But we have, you know, the executive committee is dedicated to making sure those things happen. So it's not a lot of time, but it is significant if you are interested in making sure OPAC works right. And especially with only 2 meetings a year, sometimes 3, like we're, you know, like we have this year, it will take a little bit more planning and a little more time, but I think it's worth the effort, but you know, that's just me. I don't know if Tara, if you want to add anything, or if I should go to Karina next.
No,
Yeah,
please,
Karina.
Tara, go ahead.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
well, I think you should go first, then I'll talk.
Okay. I think that all very much describes the situation, and it, you know, it's what you put into it, but also what your fellow executive committee members, we have a really good executive committee right now, and it's, you know, been great working under Susan's leadership, Andy's guidance. Andy is amazing at helping us do a lot of our work for us. So, it's not a huge time commitment, but there is some extra work beyond just coming to the standard OPAC meetings and setting agendas, finding issues that we should be bringing and flagging issues we should be bringing to OPAC. So those are some of the items, and making sure we stay on top of things like elections, stack appointments, all the things that sometimes can tend to fall to the side.
Karina, you put your hand down, but I'll go to you next. Joe, did you have something else too? Okay.
No, that was a legacy hand, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Karina,
I think
go.
mine automatically came down because it had been up for so long. But I was just gonna kind of reiterate that there is sort of an executive committee meeting usually before every, so you know, you can kind of count on that. That's usually about an hour, maybe, depending on how much stuff we have. But there are sometimes like emails or you know, quick meetings that happen. So just like thinking about that in your life. The other thing I was going to ask is if we have a scaffolding or an opportunity, are we planning on nominations, just self-nominations, or are we planning on people nominating? And I remember last time there was concern around having a good process for that, for it being maybe, you know, not that people can be private or check with people before they nominate, and then how we do the voting. So I think there's some process scaffolding that would be great to clarify before we end this discussion, or actually get into assessing who's interested.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about that as much lately, but that might be something that we need to talk about offline to get into place for the next meeting, unless, you know, you have some ideas now that the executive committee can work with, because I know it was kind of a little clunky last time. And part of that, I think, was because we were online, even though, you know, online isn't always the issue, but it certainly has been, because OPAC hasn't met in person for 3 years now, I think. Is it 3 years, 4 years?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
been at
it's
least
been
that long.
Yeah. So I think we probably need to come up with some ideas for online elections, and, you know, if those are different than in-person elections. So that's just my thoughts at this point. Do we have any comments about that? Because I don't know that we can decide on something at this meeting, Andy. We may end up.
Well, I guess I would love to get some agreement on some general principles and maybe a general process to move forward. And my opinion is that the executive committee could be the entity that helps with this. And the way I would think about it happening is that individuals could self-nominate, or they could be nominated by or they could nominate somebody else who's a member of the committee. But before those names are put on a public slate for consideration in leadership, the executive committee could follow through to make sure that they were comfortable and willing to serve. I would love to have the set of names complete by a couple of weeks ahead of the meeting time to give people fair notice. And then ahead of the meeting, having a potential suite of members for the different positions is the goal, right? If those who are currently serving are willing to continue to serve, that would be great. They may want to change positions that they are serving in. So I want to allow the maximum amount of flexibility for members, while also giving them the ability to politely decline if the duty does not work with their with them. So that's what I would suggest. And I think if we set forth some general timelines and guidelines, I think that would help.
Okay. Perfect, Andy. Thank you. Karina.
Yeah, Andy said a chunk of what I was going to suggest, but I guess I would add that it might be good if we had a call for nominations that went out to the council deadline by which they are received, a way to receive them, like they get emailed or they get some electronic way of doing that. Then the process that Andy described, and then I think that if there's that anybody who's being considered might at the meeting where they're being considered come and just offer a few words about what they why they want to do it, something like that.
Okay. Thank you, Karina. Anybody else have suggestions or ideas?
I'm gonna stop the share so I can see you all again. I have a question for Steve. How does a process like that work consistent with our procedures, right? Because in my view, our previous practices have been much more informal in this kind of transition of leadership.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of guidance on it. It's just the statute is 196-438-4, and it says the voting members shall elect a chair, and we elect a vice chair as well, but it doesn't structure it other than that. So I think we have a lot of latitude. We don't have that. Similarly, we don't have it in our procedures document really laid out how we would do that. Andy, I do have one question. I see 7 voting members on. Am I missing somebody? I'm trying to count noses.
I thought we had 8, but let me do the count again.
So it may be an informational meeting at this point.
Yeah, Steve, I think you're right. I'm counting 7, and
Okay.
I think I was counting Mark Kuhila as the 8th who could be here.
I mean, we can proceed. We just don't have a
Yep.
quorum for purposes
Right.
of taking an action.
Do the
So-
vacant seats count towards the quorum total?
Yeah, so
Oh, okay.
even though we
Just
have
checking.
vacancies, even because we have a statutory body of 14 voting members, we have to have 8. We can still do something with 8 people present with up to 5 because it's a majority of the quorum. So 5 could vote to do something today if we had 8. But we do count the vacancies as to, needed.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So Andy, that would mean the action we took on
Yeah, it means we need to redo the approval of the meeting
Right.
summary.
at the next meeting. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Leanne?
Well, I didn't say that I'm a Clatsop County Commissioner, and I'm pretty sure it's a role conflict and not allowable. And I haven't been named by the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners as an alternate to Mark Quila, who's the chair and the delegate from the 3 counties. But you know, if Steve Shipsey blesses it, I'll do it. But I don't think it's legal. Just saying.
Thank you, Leanne.
It's a lovely offer, but I don't think it works.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Nope. Okay. So at this point, so moving forward, can we put something, you know, what you, Andy and Karina talked about? Can we put something like that in writing for in advance of the next meeting? And at the same time, ask anybody who is interested in the chair or vice chair positions to talk to one of us about it?
I think we could solicit a call between meetings and then take the action at the next meeting under any procedure that we lay out. And
Okay.
that would be fine. As long as we had, you know, a process where people had the opportunity to either self-select or nominate, I think we're in good shape.
Right. Okay. Amelia, I see you have your hand up.
I just wanted to kind of clarify what we were talking about with the nominations. Basically, the plan is to get all the nominations organized beforehand electronically via email or calls. And then during the meeting, we would have the executive committee and the nominees explain why they want to do it and then do like a formal vote during the meeting. Is that what we discussed?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, and from a public meeting standpoint, we do want to have any dialogue about it at the meeting and not engage accidentally in a sequential public meeting by, you know,
Right.
having side conversations between meetings. So.
Good point.
I think that sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Tara.
Well, 2 things. I think we should have in place the scenario where somebody's nominated for all seats or is interested in any seat on the executive committee. How do we want to sequentially do a vote so that they might have a chance at any of the seats? I know we've had that happen in the past. And then also just wanted to address what Susan said. I'm going to be stepping back from the executive committee role. I'm going to remain in my seat on OPAC until we find another. I am actively seeking other coastal conservation reps, but will remain in my seat until we're able to find someone else willing to serve. So that said, don't nominate me. But I appreciate the opportunity. It's been so wonderful working on the executive committee with Susan and the other executive committee members. And so it's a great opportunity to get that leadership role, and really highly recommend everyone throw their name in the hat, but don't nominate me.
Thank you, Tara.
Susan, if I can just summarize what I've heard. I've heard that we want to have a call for nominations and a deadline for that. I think the executive committee would review that call for nominations, and if it's a self-nomination, we don't need to confirm with the individual, but if it is nominating somebody else, then we would confirm with that individual. And in terms of the roles, I think when you are submitting that nomination, there should be a role identified with it, or at least an interest or willingness to serve in the different roles that are available. At our upcoming meeting where we will take action on this, I would prefer if we went down the list from the chair, vice chair to the at-large, in order of responsibility, as I think that would kind of honor kind of the different candidates and their willingness to serve. So we would have that list of nominees available ahead of time, and then at the meeting we would be able to allow the nominees to voice their interest in the positions, and then the group can go down the roll call, so to speak, and respond.
Yes. I think that sounds like a plan.
Did I miss anything? Because I'm certainly happy and willing to implement that plan to set us up for success in April.
I don't think so. Tara?
I was just gonna say that sounds great. And one just point of order, Steve or Andy, can non-voting members or voting members be part of the executive committee if people are nominating?
That is a great question.
I don't think it's clear, but I just wanted to throw it out there if somebody was gonna nominate someone of a non-voting. I think we've always had voting members for the most part, but
yeah,
wanted to flag that. And we don't have to answer now. We could put that in our process procedures that we send out after.
Right. Margaret, go for it.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to clarify, we do not have a quorum today. We would need that in order to, take action on the executive committee. Are there concerns about unfilled seats? I just wonder where we're at right now. Like, how close are we to a quorum? Like, if we were all here, what's that number? That all those filled seats versus like the 8 quorum that we need.
So we have a total of 14 voting members on the council, or statutorily there's 14 voting members that can be appointed to the council.
Right. And
that's why we're a quorum of 8, because we're a majority of the voting members.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah. I'm wondering how many seats are filled of those 14 right now.
I think you have 3 vacancies. Andy, correct me if I'm wrong.
3, yes. I mean, but we also have, terms that have expired with people who are still serving in those positions. So we actually need more seats to be filled. But Richard has been kind enough to continue his service. And I've heard Susan and Tara say the same, but we do need to recruit.
We are able to serve until replaced, but eventually you do get paroled.
So we only have 3 missing people. No, there's 4 missing people today that are at least serving on OPAC, even if they're not, they're just serving it, the pleasure. Yeah. And then we those 4 people, we just need to make sure that they're at our next meeting. Right. Okay.
We just need to make sure that 8 people are at our next meeting from a voting member perspective.
Right. And our next meeting will be a full day, probably, right? So I expect more people will join us on that day. Yeah. Okay. Does that wrap everything up for executive committee planning?
I think so.
Okay. Next up, we have Jeff Burright talking about the Oregon Offshore Wind Energy Roadmap update and discussion. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. As Susan mentioned, I'm Jeff Burright. I work with Andy at DLCD, and I am the Offshore Wind Energy Roadmap Coordinator. I'm here today to give you an update on where we are in the development of the roadmap and some connections between the discussions that are going on with the roadmap and the work of OPAC. And then I'll be followed by Karina, who will be talking about the research piece around offshore wind, which does have some linkages as well with the roadmap. I have some slides to show you with the overall status, but I guess I'll start at a higher level for people who are maybe entering into this for the first time. I know we have some new members, just to explain what we're doing here. To take it back several years, starting in around 2019, and it goes back even further than that, but starting around 2019, The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, federal agency responsible for issuing leases of the seafloor on the outer continental shelf, began a process with the state of Oregon, other federal agencies, local communities, tribes, to try to identify places off the coast of Oregon that might be suitable for leasing for offshore wind energy potential. So we're talking floating turbines in deep water, out of state waters offshore. BOEM underwent a 4 or 5 year process trying to identify some sites. And in 2024, that process culminated with them identifying 2 wind energy areas off the coast of Oregon. One was off the coast of Coos Bay Reedsport area, and that one was, I think, 30 something miles offshore. And the other one was off the offshore Brookings. And the intent at the time was for BOEM to begin an auction to lease those areas for exploring offshore wind energy potential. Now, a lease is not the same thing as agreeing to what a project may or may not be approvable. And there's about a 5-year gap in between those processes. So in 2024, the state underwent our regulatory role under the Coastal Zone Management Act to perform federal consistency review of those of that leasing proposal by BOEM, where we looked at the information they provided, the action they were proposing to take, which was just leasing, and then studies around the areas that were leased, and to compare that against our state enforceable policies. Those are the policies that we have on the books, either at the state level or the local level, that govern the uses of and the utilization of resources in the coastal zone. And we also get to look at federal waters for complex reasons. So we went through a public process, we looked at it through our policies, and we provided a consistency concurrence that leasing could move forward on the understanding that we would get another bite of the apple some years down the road when there's actually a project proposed. So BOEM was prepared to move forward with leasing, and then a few things happened. The 4 of the 5 bidders withdrew from consideration for the auction, citing a number of reasons, but I mean, the sum total was that the risk picture just wasn't right. At the same time, in the 2024 legislative session, the legislature, recognizing that offshore wind could be a real possibility for Oregon, decided that it would be prudent for the state to develop an offshore wind roadmap. And the purpose of that roadmap, as stated in the bill that initiated it, is to define standards to be considered in future offshore wind decisions and processes, with the idea that essentially, as a state, we need to sharpen our tools and make sure that the seat at the table we get in this process is a strong position that is reflective of our values and interests as a state. So bidders were withdrawing. The state had initiated this roadmap process. The governor sent a letter to the Secretary of Interior requesting that leasing be postponed until the roadmap could be completed, and we had a chance to amend any policies that we needed to implement the roadmap. And Secretary of Interior, BOEM, honored that request, postponed the leasing. And then we had a new federal administration with a new direction. And that direction has been to not issue any further leases for offshore wind as an indeterminate temporary withdrawal. And then last year in the summertime, the Department of Interior put out a news release that they had rescinded all wind energy areas around the country, including the 2 off of Oregon. So what that functionally means for the state is that we are back at square one, that if BOEM wanted to conduct leasing again, presumably they would need to go through that same site identification process to then select those areas they would offer up for leasing. So we're in this strange spot where the future of offshore wind for Oregon is uncertain at the moment. California, on the other hand, has 5 leases that they issued in 2022, and they are proceeding. But for Oregon, it's a little uncertain where things might land. And yet we had the legislature in 2024 saying we would like to conduct planning and assess our policies and be ready for the potential of offshore wind. And so DLCD, we began this process in November of 24, where we recruited a roadmap roundtable of advisors. We have over 50 members representing a range of interests that are helping us to develop this roadmap. Originally, our deadline was September of 2025. However, recognizing that this stuff takes time to do right and that there was a lot of engagement work that we wanted to do, the legislature gave us an extension until the end of this year, 2026, to put out that final roadmap. So that's the context of what we've been up to for over a year. We've been meeting almost monthly with our roundtable, and we're at a place now where we are just about ready to bring a draft roadmap out for public review. And Andy, if you will enable screen sharing, I can begin my slides now. But before I dive in, from that really high-level overview, does anybody have any questions? I see Commissioner Thompson's hand.
Oh, yeah. Looking for that economic consideration. Is anybody, Mr. Burright, thank you for your kind attention. Is anyone looking at the cost benefit analysis on any of these programs in California, like in terms of delivery? Because I get emails questioning value added, and I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. There have been various studies of the anticipated levelized cost of energy for California. Boy, it's in the roadmap. I would only be guessing to try to repeat the numbers here. It's more expensive than the power from the Bonneville Dam or from the BPA system, for example. But for California, who has a fairly high cost of power, it seems to be in the realm of economic feasibility for them. There have also been studies of the grid aspects of offshore wind, looking at the cost benefit of it would be billions of dollars of grid enhancements needed, not only to connect offshore wind projects to the onshore grid, but to then increase the interconnections of the regional grid to be able to move that power where it's needed. And there was a study done, the West Coast Offshore Wind Transmission Study last year, that essentially found that the investments you would make in the grid would more than pay for themselves, because it would allow you to move power from lower cost sources to higher cost areas in the summertime for California. And then in the winter time, when we have some price spikes because of congestion on the system, there would be a backflow of value that way. So there have been those kinds of studies. However, the roadmap does identify that a more holistic cost benefit study for Oregon is something that would be one of our research priorities. And we also have the Oregon Energy Strategy that was put out by Oregon Department of Energy this past year, that didn't include a whole lot of information about offshore wind, but flagged it as something that they want to continue researching and looking at those emerging technology options to see what balances out best for the state.
Excellent response. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions high level before I dive into where we're at?
No questions, but just a comment that in your summary, I mean, look, hundreds of comments that have come in that you've, gone through, bringing together 50 people. I mean, it's just every time you present, Jeff, I'm always very impressed. So I look forward to hearing the update and seeing the draft when it's ready.
Well, thank you. I smeared a little Vaseline on my camera, so you can't see my raccoon eyes right now from just, but I appreciate it. All right, so the big news is we're ready for a public draft, or we're just very nearly ready. And we're planning it for a couple of weeks from now, if all goes as planned. As Tara mentioned, we've had a couple of early drafts of the roadmap that have been worked through by our roundtable. So we had a first draft in September that had about 600 comments to work through. Produced out of that a second draft in November that had fewer comments, but the rub there is that some of them were more philosophical in nature, and so it took a fair amount of good thought to figure out how to incorporate in the draft. And that's brought us to a place where draft number 3, which is meant for public review, is right now with our director's office, with the Department of Justice, and there's a copy with the governor's office as well. And I've asked them for a review deadline of February 3rd, which would give me time to turn around the final version of the public draft by February 10th. This date might move a little bit, but generally speaking, we're close. Once we release the document for public review, we are starting with a plan for a 45-day public comment period. That's adjustable. If people have good reasons for needing some more time, we can accommodate that. During that period, we're also planning a total of 7 public meetings to explain what's in the roadmap and to invite comment on the roadmap. We're planning 2 virtual meetings, one at the front and one at the back, and in the middle having 5 in-person meetings on the coast. And I'll show you our plan for that here in just a moment. In addition, during the public comment period, we're working with Oregon Consensus and Oregon's Kitchen Table to conduct some additional youth engagement work. We were fortunate in that at our first roadmap meeting in Florence in November of 24, we had a group of high school students from Mapleton High School who attended, and they participated in one of our early exercises, which was a future visioning exercise of imagine a future with offshore wind turbines and without, and tell us what the hallmarks of a future of no regrets might look like. And we want to take that same concept and invite multiple teams of high school students to engage with the roadmap and what we've come up with so far, and asking some similar questions for their visions of the future and their recommendations for the roadmap to help us get there. So that's an additional piece. And those will have adult coaches. The responses will be judged and recorded to be submitted as public comments. And then based on the judges' findings, the winning team will be invited to our next roadmap roundtable meeting to talk to us. So we're pretty excited about that. And we're working out our public comment methods. We've got our email address that we've set up for the roadmap. We're going to have a public comment guide. We also have a survey that we were using last spring during some public meetings that we're going to retool as another way for people to provide feedback into this. The last thing I'll mention is that since October, over the summer, we established a tribes-only table to have some side conversations to discuss in a confidential setting with the federally recognized tribes of Oregon who wish to participate, the ability to talk through what their interests in the roadmap might be so that we can incorporate those. After those conversations through the summer, once we had that first draft out, we then have invited formal consultation with tribes, and we've had 2 respondents so far. We just had another tribes-only table meeting this morning where others indicated that they may want to be talking with us in the spring. So that is ongoing as well as part of our process. And just big picture, again, to what House Bill 4080 directed the roadmap to focus on. It gave us a number of topic areas to have as our focus. And what's not included here, but is threaded throughout as a core principle, is meaningful engagement with communities. And in addition to that, the roadmap is directed to support local and regional coastal communities, to support economic development while sustaining existing economic industries, to develop an offshore wind workforce that is trained, housed, and equitable, to protect tribal interests, including cultural resources, visual resources, natural resources, and other interests of tribes, protecting the environment and species, and then achieving the state's energy and climate objectives. And so these were the various lenses through which we were not only looking at the policies that we have on the books to gauge their adequacy, but also as we kind of expanded what we thought this roadmap could be, to take it into the realm of what are some recommended actions that the state can take to prepare us for the various futures that could be ahead of us. I'll also mention that House Bill 4080 directed us to develop not only an enforceable policy assessment to look for gaps, but also a government capacity assessment to ask ourselves, what would we need as a state in terms of staffing and other resources in order to fully participate and engage in offshore wind processes? And my colleague Cynthia Smith has been leading that effort, both of those efforts, really. And as part of the capacity assessment, we also reached out to the cities and counties along the coast and had meetings with them to inform the capacity assessment at the local level. And we've also extended the invitation to tribes that if they want to provide some information about what their capacity needs would be, that would be good information to include in the roadmap so that the legislature has a complete picture. Just to go over the various alternative futures that are considered in the roadmap. Something that we came to throughout our process was recognition that this roadmap is not just driving to one future. This is not just a roadmap from where we are now to offshore wind turbines. And a phrase that came out of one of our meetings that I really liked was to consider this roadmap to be an atlas of possible futures. We want to look at the map of all the paths and where they might lead. And so from that, our roadmap has 4 alternative futures that we are considering. And one of them has kind of a variant to it. We begin with kind of the status quo that Oregon does not pursue offshore wind in any way, and we meet our energy and climate objectives through other means, focusing instead on natural resources and existing economic opportunities for the coast. The second alternative future relates to economic participation only. And what this means is that instead of pursuing hosting of turbines off of our coast, we would instead try to support the development of offshore wind in other states or around the region internationally, and look for a niche that is well suited for Oregon's capabilities. And that could be supply chain support, maritime services, research and development, those various ways in which Oregon could participate without having turbines themselves. Another alternative future we considered is to have a pilot project off of Oregon, kind of following the example of the PacWave wave energy testing facility, and then the state of Maine got a lease for a research array for offshore wind a year or 2 ago, with the idea that, consistent with Part 5 of the Territorial Sea Plan, which states a preference for phased development or pilot projects when your information is limited, this might be a path that we wanted to explore. And then the final path relates to kind of that concept of development of offshore wind energy projects, we don't specifically limit either a lower or upper end of how many projects would be there, but we do have a discussion in the roadmap about the concept of, should there be any kind of limitation? Should there be a cap on the total capacity that the state is willing to entertain? And we tried to capture a range of views around that question. Within this future where we would have offshore wind, there are two versions of it. The first version assumes that not only do we have offshore wind offshore, but we also pursue shoreside development that would support offshore wind. So that would include the development of port facilities that can put these things together, or that can have laydown yards for major equipment. There's, I think, an assumption at this point that that would also involve navigation channel modifications just to accommodate the size of these foundations, plus having wet storage, so essentially parking lots that are in inland waters as they're building and staging these devices. The other variant of this future is hosting offshore wind turbines without the port development side of it. The idea being, can we work with the ports that we've got? And there may be some minimal amount of, port activity to do things like operations and maintenance, materials storage, that kind of thing. But really drawing the line at having a staging facility where these things are assembled and looking at the various trade-offs of those two alternatives and what they might mean. We come out of at least for the public draft, we have a number of key messages in our executive summary that I'll show here on the screen. I won't read every word, but we talk about the need for state or local rulemaking in the near term to address the policy gaps that we've identified. We talk about needs for more information before Oregon is ready to make decisions about projects. And that ties into this concept of a research agenda that Karina will be discussing. And it ties in too with work that the state of California is initiating right now to build a West Coast Science Collaborative. So we're looking at how we might participate in that collaborative, but then also having an Oregon-centric science collaborative so that we can start to build a circle of understanding and try to reach consensus about what the science is telling us. We also talk about the potential for Oregon to lead its own marine spatial planning process that is inclusive of both onshore and offshore and in federal waters, with the idea that the state has an opportunity to pre-identify those areas that may be more or less challenging from the perspective of our policies, and to provide that to the federal government if they come back around again to try to preemptively guide where future siting might happen. And that's also consistent with the idea that the top rung of the ladder for mitigation is avoidance. And so if we can pre-identify those areas to avoid, that's good practice. We talk about the need for various policy exploration around incentivizing these longer lead time energy resources that are inclusive of offshore wind, but also other things that are out there, and the policies that might need to be in place in order to de-risk those from the industry side. And I'll pause. Commissioner Thompson.
Well, you just excite my curiosity. Is anybody looking if we can use offshore wind to power data centers? Because they're energy hogs and they're water hogs. I don't know if it's even feasible to consider that, but Eastern Oregon counties, some of them are achieving great economic gains, but the costs are considerable. Is what I'm asking a reasonable question? Can you help me?
Absolutely a reasonable question. The answer is that I'm not aware of anyone, at least on the state side, looking at that linkage there. And just to put on my speculation hat, I would think that if I was a company that was looking at how and where to site data centers, I would be thinking about the cost of power, the consistency of that power, And we haven't seen those kinds of proposals come our way. And
Well, we could be proactive perhaps if it's, I mean, if it's feasible. Because I don't want Oregon consumers to be hit with the water costs and the energy costs associated with what we're seeing develop now. And if we had a better alternative that was a win-win situation.
yeah, and there may be a convergence of exercises here where we have the energy strategy that is looking at Oregon's energy needs writ large and the paths to get us to where we need to be. And then I'm also reading in the news the governor's new task force around data centers that, you know, and we have the roadmap here that I could imagine there would be some information sharing and discussion around that.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. The back half of our key messages, and again, these are malleable as our process goes forward. Recognizing that Oregon needs to increase our capacity and expertise in order to participate in these processes, and that requires action from the legislature. That tribal consultation should be integrated into research and analysis from the beginning and not an after the fact thought. And that also tribal data sovereignty is an important concept and important safeguard to be brought into this process and formalized. We also talk about the potential of community agreements, and specifically enforceable community agreements, as a mechanism that might help to bridge the gap with local communities who are concerned that there may be effects from offshore wind development that are not appropriately accounted for or brought into the decision making on the one hand. So that can be a way for communities to have a greater role in the process. But then also thinking about how can we bring this concept of community agreements into our state policy structure in a way to make them required when they're appropriate, but to also make them enforceable. Accountability has been a big theme in our roadmap discussions. And so we dedicate time and energy in the roadmap to talking about various mechanisms for that, not only from the community agreement side and contractual agreements, but also when it comes to adaptive management and the ongoing role of the state. The ninth one relates to this idea of, you know, if we participate economically in offshore wind, whether we host turbines or not, there's been a thought that that's a worthwhile to look down and see if there's an opportunity there, regardless of what future path we choose. You know, there are some who believe that might be a low-hanging fruit with relatively fewer regrets to start there. And then number 10, Commissioner Thompson, coming back to your previous comment, that Oregon should continue to evaluate all renewable energy options and have a thorough cost-benefit analysis to help guide when we make investment decisions. So those are some of the big takeaways. And yes, please go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to reconfirm my commitment to a healthy environment. All of the environmental protections and community concerns absolutely taken into account, but also balancing that with the trends that we see about what we need to pay attention to, which is ecologically sustainable economic development in order to have the economy, the planet, the people, all that. Just want to reconfirm environmental protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. And that is woven throughout the entire roadmap when we're looking at the policies and their adequacy, and these concepts of how we manage uncertainty and risk responsibly. What are the mechanisms we need to have in place as safeguards? That has been high on the minds of many. Coming back to our schedule here, this is a pictorial of where we are going from today until our plan to submit the roadmap to the legislature. As I mentioned, we're planning on public review starting February 10th, going through the end of March. it is possible to extend that with our public meetings occurring throughout there. After that public review period is completed, we'll reconvene our roadmap roundtable to talk about the feedback that we've received from the public and how that can result in changes to the roadmap to make it responsive. And so we have a series of meetings set up in April, May, and June, with the intent that by May or June, we have a roadmap that people are able to stand behind. And then the plan would be to submit a final roadmap to the legislature. I'm aiming for July. And the timing of that is somewhat directed toward having it in the hands of legislators in advance of the next long legislative session. So people have time to really think about it. As I mentioned, our public meeting calendar, we are locking down dates and locations and venues, working on it this week with the intent to be able to publish them all when we go out for public comment here in a couple of weeks. But tentatively, I'm aiming for February 25th for a virtual public meeting. That would be the first opportunity. The first week of March, beginning with an in-person public meeting in Newport. And then the week of March 9th, having 3 meetings in Coos Bay, Reedsport, and Brookings. And then following up the following week, the third week, with a public meeting in Astoria, and then closing it all out with a bookending virtual public meeting. That's where we're at on that. Oh, and I will mention, we would plan to be capturing public comment. People would have the opportunity to provide oral comment there in addition to the written opportunities that they'll have. Already talked about this one somewhat. This is the Youth Voices project. The Oregon Consensus and Oregon's Kitchen Table are getting going. But I'll just say again that this project is going to be on somewhat of a rapid timetable so that the groups can be working during our public comment period, that the teams will be working with the information in the roadmap and some supplemental information we can give them to talk through their vision and proposals. And teams will be compensated with a stipend for participating, and applications close on February 6th. So if anybody out there knows of high school students or wants to help us spread the word, the recruitment is right now open, and we love it if people would come and join us with it. All right, and now to close off, I want to show you again some slides that we brought to you back in October, the last time that we talked about how the work that the roadmap is recommending might dovetail with the work and the schedule for OPAC. So in the green in 2026, you can see that's when we're planning to submit the roadmap. My understanding is that a process is ongoing now to begin an update of the Territorial Sea Plan Parts 1 and 2. And so that would take up the bulk of the next year and a half or so. There are some things in the roadmap that might relate to Part 2, so there could be some cross opportunity there. And then after that, we would be looking at a rulemaking to amend Parts 4 and 5 of the Territorial Sea Plan to specifically address the gaps and opportunities that the roadmap has identified. Also wanting to recognize that there's a site designation process for Part 3 that might be ongoing concurrently. Behind the scenes, before we get to a Part 4 and 5 rulemaking, there's some work that DLCD could be doing to begin setting the table for a marine spatial planning process that could come a little bit down the road, and to be trying to gather that data, maybe having some participatory data engagement work with fishing groups and others to help us identify what areas out there are to be avoided. And then kind of in the middle of a Part 4 and 5 rulemaking, starting out that sea space suitability for offshore wind so that the two can be talking to one another. because on the one hand, you need to have a fairly good grasp of what your policies are going to be before you can then look at a map and decide where might fit with that policy versus another. But on the other hand, we recognize that we don't want to drag this out too long. We want to try to get everything buttoned up. And I don't think we need to dwell on this one. It's basically the same information, but then putting in some legislative milestones. And with that, any questions, points to raise?
Wow, Jeff, that was a lot. Thank you. I know you have worked tirelessly, and probably your family doesn't even recognize you anymore because you spent so much time on this, but truly appreciate everything you've done over the past year and a half. And I can't imagine, but you've done a lot. And the roadmap process has been really good. You thought it out well, and with the Oregon consensus facilitation too. And with DLCD staff support, I think it got a lot of good voices in there, and it was pretty fair. So I think it's really well done.
Thank you. I just feel like the collector of, if it was just me sitting down to write this thing, it would be pretty poor. So it's taken everybody.
Hey, Jeff, a round of applause for you. What a patient man. You helped mentor me through all of this. Andy and I may have seen the structures in Aberdeen, right, over in Scotland, but you walking us through this whole process and us and me sharing it to other people, I felt I've been in good hands all along, and you guys you're not done yet. But I mean, thank you. So the fishing industry, Oregon, thanks you for what you've done.
Definitely. Yep. So I have one question for Jeff. Have you seen, and I think I know the answer, but I don't know. I know since BOEM, took back the leases, and since we had a change in administration, it's been difficult for me to get, especially people in the seafood industry, interested in offshore wind at a time when it's like, oh, it's not going anywhere. But have you seen that across the board? Or I know I've been trying to tell people now is the time, if we want to ensure we have a future that may include offshore wind or not, but now is the time to make that future. Have you seen a change in that as well?
I guess anecdotally, I would say yes. Some of the meetings that we had with some of the cities and counties, we would hear that, like, on the one hand, we thought this was gone. And especially on the South Coast, there were the ballot measures in Coos and Curry counties putting forward a position that the county should oppose offshore wind. And so there was that sentiment of, well, we already told you what we want on this. And so why are we still talking about it? And then we also did some additional community engagement work through the spring and summer of last year, talking with supply chain groups, tourism groups. I've been talking with the seafood commodity commissions, and we did an early youth discussion, and getting people and also community-based organizations up and down the coast, and getting people to invest time when people have a lot of other things on their mind right now was a challenge. Yeah, but I would agree with your take that the best time to be planning is before you need a plan. So.
Okay, Karina, go for it.
I would just offer, Jeff and I went to Rhode Island to talk with variety of community members and planners and folks who had been involved in, including fishing community members. And the one remark that has stuck with me was one of the fishermen who's involved in some of the monitoring work now, I believe, who really said, you know, use this time. His recommendation to us and to folks in the community was to use this time because they had pauses in their, you know, offshore wind development, and it kept coming back. So that was his message to us to convey back here, was make good use of the pause, because when it comes up, it's fast and hard to address if you're not ready. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that anecdote. Jeff, do you remember that?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's good information for sure. Thank you, Karina. Anybody else have questions? Tara?
Not a question, but sounds really neat what you're doing with the youth. And I know you said the winning team will come present to the roundtable, but I'm wondering if maybe OPAC might consider inviting them to come present with us as well. So just wanted to put a pin in that for an executive committee discussion at a later date.
Good idea.
I don't know when your next meeting is, you know, the timing of school years, but
I believe it's April, but
Yep.
I'm looking to Andy and Susan to remind me.
Yep, April 21st or 23rd, which we will talk about later today. Okay, any other comments or questions for Jeff? I'm not seeing any. Jeff, I think you answered everybody's question. See, this is how good you are. Yeah.
thanks all for the time.
Yeah, appreciate it. Looking forward to the next roadmap meeting and what the youth come up with for their projects. That sounds very interesting. So, yeah. Okay, thank you, Jeff. Andy, I think we are a little bit over time. By
We are
about 50
scheduled for a break, but we do have members of the stack joining. So might I suggest an abbreviated break?
5 minutes, is that too short? Should we do 10? 5 or 10?
5 minutes would be enough.
I think 5 minutes works for me.
5 works.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break and come back at 2:35.
On your mark, get set, go.
Okay, I see it's 2:35. See people starting to come back, turn on the cameras, say hi. And I think we're ready to move into. Why am I not seeing it? Scientific
Karina,
and Technical Advisory Committee report. Is
go
that
ahead
right?
and share your
Yeah.
screen when you're ready, Karina.
Okay, great.
Yep. Welcome, Karina.
Thank you. Let me see here. Let me go ahead and start the screen share. And I think we have all of the folks on board from the stack. We're going to help present. So let's see, just give me a sec here.
All good.
How does that look?
It's getting there. It's taking, there we go.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here. As you know, OPAC charged the stack with developing a report, and we've shared the final draft with you all, and you should have it available. And we have a subset of our stack members and co-authors on the report here to present, help me present and answer your questions about it. As Jeff identified, we are focusing kind of on the knowledge gaps and research needs and a framework for prioritizing research projects should they be pursued. So anyway, that's the gist of it. And today with me, we have Will White, Jim Lerjak, Selena Happel, Bill Yeager, and an ad hoc member of the group that worked on this, Bryson Robertson, who are gonna help me co-present. So they'll be shifting on and off with me as we go through the slide deck. So welcome to everyone. And then the rest of the stack obviously contributed as well, but we're not able to be here today. So just to remind everybody, just to highlight the charge that we were given. So as you may remember, we were asked to develop an offshore wind energy research prioritization framework to summarize regionally relevant research and to identify current knowledge gaps, to crosswalk the knowledge gaps and questions we identified with other groups who are identifying them as well, such as the Roadmap Roundtable and others who have worked in various capacities, and to apply the research prioritization to the knowledge gaps to identify the high-level priority research and monitoring needs for Oregon. So that was what we were charged with. And last time we did present to the OPAC a little bit about how we went about developing our report and doing our work. So I'm just going to summarize that. We had 4 work groups and 1 ad hoc member work on these topic areas, and we ended up breaking down into, sort of natural science and social science and engineering, focusing on literature review, background studies, empirical studies. And we ended up, it was not possible with the expertise on the stack. The topic areas are so broad. There's so many areas of expertise needed that we really couldn't cover everything. And so what we focused on were topics that had not already been written about and addressed in the floating offshore wind energy infrastructure chapter of the 7th Oregon Climate Assessment, which several of the co-authors on the stack also participated in writing. There's a big chunk of information there. We focused also on the areas of expertise of our members. That was the easiest lift, if you will, for the stack to address. And we did try to do a pretty good review of new reports and empirical data that were relevant to floating offshore wind, particularly in the Oregon context. So that was how we went about sort of focusing our work. And we're going to provide you with an overview of the report. Last time we went into more detail on sort of what we had learned, the knowledge gaps, what's known, what's not known. But for this presentation, we're really focusing on the outcomes of the report. So there are 3 main sections of the report, if you will. There's the framework, and we're going to present on that and do 2 worked examples for you today, so you can kind of see how it might work. The report includes the synthesis of knowledge gaps and research needs across these different domains: natural science, social science, and engineering. And then we do include in the report a bibliography of regionally relevant scientific and technical literature, mostly ecological, but some reports that are relevant on floating offshore wind, and that may be a good resource for folks who may be planning studies soon or trying to understand what the relevant and most recent empirical data are that could be relevant for Oregon. So that's the framing of the report. And we'll start with the research prioritization framework. And Will White from OSU led that effort, and he is with us today. So I'm going to invite Will, and Will, I'm going to go ahead and advance the slides for you, if that's okay. And I'm going to invite Will to take over presenting.
Fantastic. Welcome, Will.
Thank you very much.
Okay, there's your first slide.
Right, so the goal of this is that there are a lot of potential scientific questions that could be asked about floating offshore wind, and we were tasked with developing a framework to prioritize those projects, but given limited funding and limited time. And so our goal in this was to come up with a scheme to rank potential research questions based on their relevance, the feasibility of success, the amount of effort and funding required, and the expected impact of the information you'd gain from that project. And so based on some of our experiences in similar sort of research prioritization efforts in other contexts, we developed a two-step process that attempts to make this sort of abstract approach to prioritization somewhat concrete and quantitative, and also take advantage of the scientific expertise of the stack. So it's a two-step process, with the first step scoring a proposed research question based on a number of different categorical questions related to their feasibility, the existing knowledge, and the potential for accomplishing research on a timescale that's relevant to management decisions. This is just a subset of the list that we came up with. And as Karina said, we'll go through two worked examples so you can see how we'd actually apply this going forward. So the second step is then to use expert opinion to categorize potential research projects in this four-part matrix where we have two axes. One, the level of scientific impact or the value of scientific knowledge that would come out of the project, and the other axis being the amount of funding and effort that would be required to gain that knowledge. And the idea is that you can sort of see how this would break down into projects that are easy to do, but also wouldn't have a huge impact. We'd call sort of fill-ins. There are projects that would take a lot of effort, but would not necessarily produce data that are super meaningful for management decisions. That's in the red. And then we have these other tasks that are high impact and maybe would be easy to accomplish using existing data or existing analysis tools. These would be quick wins. And we'd have other projects that would take a lot of effort, but would produce really necessary information. And the idea is that we would only look for projects that fall into those two green squares, and only projects that within those squares scored above the median from those step one scores. And I apologize for anyone who is red-green colorblind, but it's the top half of this matrix. And so to sort of illustrate how this would work out, we picked two research questions that are based on some questions that have been solicited from the public in various events over the past year or so. And these are also active scientific questions in the scientific community. So the first is, will floating offshore infrastructure cause some effect on the north to south winds that drive coastal upwelling in this region? And will that affect primary productivity in the phytoplankton that is the basis of the food web on our continental shelf? And the second question is about the electromagnetic fields that are generated by the transmission cables and the infrastructure itself. And will that affect the navigation or orientation or movement of marine species that rely on electromagnetic fields and detecting those fields in order to navigate and find prey? And a particular concern would be species like salmon in or near estuaries, because they use those fields to navigate as part of their migratory life history. Okay, so to take the first example, that's all about the reduction in wind-driven upwelling. We could rank these all these different categories with a 0, 1, or 2 score, ranging from does not address this category versus fully addresses. And so in this case, we would rank the importance to decision-making as a 1, because it's not necessarily clear how a reduction in wind-driven upwelling circulation would influence Oregon state-level regulations, right? On the other hand, it is a very feasible to complete type of study because we have existing biophysical models of the wind fields and the wind-driven circulation off the coast, and you could reasonably expect to be able to alter those models to simulate the placement of wind infrastructure and get the answer to your question. And then this particular question ticks a lot of the other boxes, and so you end up with a total score of 17. Okay, to take another example about the effect of electromagnetic fields on fish navigation and movement, in this case, again, we would score it a 1 on that second category, importance to decision-making, because it's, again, unclear how rulemaking in Oregon would be affected by knowing the answer to this question. We also gave it a 1 on the feasibility to complete, because this would be a high lift in terms of the effort required. You'd have to do experimental deployments in the lab and then translate that to the field to see how the lab experiments actually translated to field results. And then we also gave it a 1 in terms of the degree to which it addresses topics that have limited existing evidence, right? So there's actually been quite a bit of work done on electromagnetic field effects on fish, but in other places. So not necessarily with Oregon-specific species, but with fish in general that respond to EMFs. We also gave this one a slightly lower score in terms of the likelihood of producing information that reduces uncertainty for management decisions. And that's really because it's uncertain whether the types of studies you could reasonably conduct, either in the lab or in the field, would scale up properly to the magnitude of the types of fields that would be generated over the spatial scales that would be present in a fully deployed floating offshore wind infrastructure setup. We also gave it a slightly lower score on the question of the relevance of the timescale, because it may be impossible to fully assess the question until a full-scale infrastructure is in place because of the spatial scale involved in floating offshore wind relative to the spatial scale of movements of some of these species. So this one ends up with a lower total score of 13. And so then if we look at that second step, the categorization, because the numerical tools exist to answer that first research question about floating infrastructure's effect on upwelling, we would classify that as one that would require less effort over a shorter time scale and could be sort of this quick win category. The EMF question would require a lot of experimentation and would be a higher investment in terms of time and resources, and we would classify that as a major project, while still recognizing that it would have a high impact in terms of giving us information about the effects on important species in Oregon. And so if you can imagine you did that for other proposed studies and gained those scores from step 1, you'd then see whether they scored higher or lower relative to the median within those 2 categories and use that to prioritize funding decisions.
Great. Thank you, Will. I think I might just add that one of the nice things about this framework is that it is pretty evergreen. It could be modified, like the criteria potentially could be elaborated on, that things were scored upon. It's not tied to like this moment in time and what we know. And it could be that STAC or another science and technical group that's relevant to whatever the process is or whatever bodies might form in the future could be the team that would use this tool. So just seems pretty flexible. Will, any other?
I did want to add that the 2 examples that we've worked through are very sort of ecological and physical in the domain they're handling. Some of the socioeconomic scientists on the STAC felt that this framework, as it's presented, isn't perfect for categorizing social science types of questions. And so it's possible that if OPAC is interested in classification of those questions as well, we might need to take a little bit of time to revise or refine the framework to accommodate that type of science.
Great. Thank you, Will. Our next section is we're going to have a few people presenting. This is the synthesis of the knowledge gaps and research needs. And in this presentation, we're focusing really on the second part, which are the identified research needs. We did, as a STAC, present to all of you at our last meeting information about the knowledge gaps in some detail already, and that hasn't changed much. Wanted you to know that the research needs have come out of that work and sort of 9 briefs, topical briefs of a few pages each that are in the report. And I'm going to invite my colleague Jim Lerzak to kick us off, and then Selena and Bryson will help us with this. So I'll hand it off to Jim.
Thanks, Karina. Yeah, so I'll go through a list of examples that the STAC identified as knowledge gaps. I think, loosely speaking, the topics relate to the physics, circulation, wind, and ocean circulation, and the lower trophic level ecosystem, nutrients, phytoplankton, and zooplankton. And then a second topic relates to biogeochemical impacts in the water column around floating offshore wind sites. And then lastly, discussing gaps related to higher trophic level fauna, such as birds, mammals, and fish. So I would say the first three bullets here are loosely related to RQ1 that Will discussed previously. I think there exists a good modeling framework that has been applied to other regions where floating offshore wind is being considered, or such as off of Europe and off the coast of California. And with that framework, it can be applied in a straightforward way to conditions off the Oregon coast. But I would say that at this point, it's a gap. While these topics have been considered off the Oregon coast, not in as much detail as the stack felt is needed. And so specific examples of gaps in this area are modeling on a fine resolution scale the winds and how they're impacted by offshore wind turbines, and the resulting upwelling circulation. And again, the gap here would be focusing on the Oregon's unique wind regime and topography. So the modeling framework that works is already there, but applying it to Oregon in detail represents a gap. And then secondly, we need to recognize that there will be impacts, big or small, need to be quantified, but they need to be quantified, measured in an environment, the coastal ocean environment, that is subject to natural variability. So changes that are occurring on seasonal timescales as long as climate change timescales. So we need to develop a robust observational method for detecting near field, far field, and cumulative effects on circulation and primary productivity. Again, a lot of this could be accomplished through a modeling framework that already exists.
Okay, great. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to keep going here. Yeah, so, and then secondly, there were some topics identified related to biogeochemical impacts within the coastal ocean, including possible impacts from either chemical or mechanical impacts related to biofouling due to the wind turbine infrastructure itself, and being able to monitor and have plans for a mitigation of these effects needs to be addressed. Not just biofouling chemicals, but also potentially microplastics, metals, and coatings. And then thirdly, some gaps were identified in monitoring and assessing impacts on higher trophic level species like birds, mammals, and fishes. And part of that is in this bullet list, the fourth one. So developing field studies that examine the species assemblages that will naturally occur near or avoid floating structures and moorings and anchors. Karina, could you go to the next slide?
Yeah,
please?
And I think I'm gonna ask Selena to present on that, since these are her questions. Okay,
sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Karina. Hi, everybody. Selena Happel from Oregon State. So we had a couple of different committees that looked at birds, mammals, and fishes. And so just as Jim pointed out, remember that things that float in the ocean attract a variety of organisms, and there are whole communities that are going to build around these devices. And so floating wind is so new, though, that and doesn't even exist on our coast yet. So exactly which species are affected and are attracted and so on and so forth is a little bit hard to anticipate, other than what we can read about these devices in other oceans, and kind of make some assumptions about how our species, similar species, would respond. But really importantly, and this has been pointed out by Pacific Fisheries Management Council and ODF&W and others, we have a need for more fine scale habitat mapping to really know which species are going to be affected and where. So, and for the birds and mammals, you have foraging routes and areas and migration routes that they're taking, like the birds are taking from their nesting habitat out to the ocean to feed and then back. And so that is something that folks have studied in some other areas around the world, but would really need to be looked at for our species here in Oregon, and particularly for listed and sensitive species. Then we have the third one down, response studies at different spatial scales. So this is where things, where some modeling and other tools really come into play, because we may detect change at the site or at the, maybe there's a test site, for example, or we may learn about what's happening down in California if they build theirs first. So, detecting change right in the near vicinity of the farms doesn't give you full information about what their impacts are on the larger scale. So we need to think about that and how to evaluate that. That's going to take a bit of effort, but again, watching and learning what happens in Northern California may be very helpful to Oregon down the road. Also, year-round monitoring programs for species that we think may actually have collision risk, and making sure that the devices have sensory systems on them so that we're actually monitoring what kind of collisions are happening over time and space.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to introduce, sorry, let me just get the thing. Bryson Robertson, who's been with OSU, but recently moved on to the University of Victoria, but he's been very involved in engineering related science of offshore wind, wave energy, variety of marine energy devices. So Bryson Robertson, welcome, and thank you for contributing to our report. Let you kind of walk us through some of the engineering questions. Oh, this is social science. I jumped the gun here. Excuse me. I got out of order. We will come back to Bryson in a minute. Bill, I meant to introduce you. Bill Yeager's been a member of the staff for quite a while and was on the social sciences team. And Bill, please, he's at OSU, and please take away this section if you would. And you have to, open up your mic.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. Bill Yeager, Applied Economics at Oregon State University. We had a small group that looked at a number of aspects of social science that relate to the topic of offshore wind. And these bullet points sort of summarize the main themes that we found that we wanted to look into. Of course, there are probably an infinite number of topics one could look at, but the co-developed research with the tribes on justice frameworks and culturally grounded governance models was one that we had quite a bit of discussion about, and it based on information that we received, had looked at, had seen reporting on questions of communication and information sharing and feedback were ones that we found to be perhaps deserving of additional inquiry and study to be sure about inclusion in this kind of endeavor. The second point, analysis of community perceptions of fairness in offshore wind outcomes and engagement processes. This was we had some interesting conversations between some of the social scientists and social science economists and the non-economist social sciences about fairness and perceptions, and how those are things that relate to information sharing and understanding and communication that are that can often be poorly understood and deserving of some better understanding about how those communication channels might function. The third bullet point, predict the potential regional economic impacts of marine terminal construction. Essentially, try to understand what kind of impacts there would be, positive and negative, and shifts. And there are economic models and tools for doing that kind of thing. And so that would be kind of activity that could involve a study to estimate those for a range of scenarios. The second to the last bullet point, predict the economic impact of floating offshore wind construction and operation on commercial fisheries at the port level using existing fisheries data sets. There have been some very interesting detailed economic analyses and studies with spatial data and remote sensing of movements of fishing fleets, and those kinds of analyses could be very useful in understanding what offshore wind, what the impacts might be, and how different fishing fleets might be concerned about what those impacts might be, and try to bring some empirical analysis to bear, even if it's simulations that could provide insight into the magnitude of some of the impacts around offshore wind and the commercial fisheries. The last point there, analysis of offshore wind value to Oregon's grid under multiple carbonization scenarios. That's I guess a general topic of how decarbonization goals might be set, a range of ways that in Oregon we might try to pursue and achieve the goals set for decarbonization, and what role offshore wind might play in that in terms of its ability to contribute to decarbonization and the costs of that contribution. That's sort of what that theme was intending to convey.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Now we are going to switch over to Bryson. So I already introduced him. So Bryson, thank you for joining us. And we'll get to the next slide. Whoops, wrong screen. There we go. Whoops, I went too fast. There we go.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for the invitation and hosting me today. So in order to sort of pull together some of these engineering needs, I reached out, I looked, of course, through the literature published over the last couple of years, but also reached out to a series of domestic and international developers, a number of utility providers, as well as some of the supply chain folks, to see where they saw the engineering challenges. But then also to put that in the context of Oregon and floating, and like, where can we actively play a role in the research questions? So I think uniformly, sort of in terms of sort of setting the standard of the place, the industries right now is at the place where they prove the technical feasibility of floating offshore wind. There's been no efforts to try and reduce the cost to minimum. It's really just been proving that we can do it, or they can do it. So that's sort of where the status quo is for most of these companies. And they're saying now, in an engineering perspective, what all of our focus is going towards is how do we reduce costs? How do we industrialize? How do we develop economies of scale? How do we reduce uncertainty risk? So there's sort of I would say, an inflection point in a lot of the engineering challenges that are presented here in terms of what the way they're looking at it. As others have said, Oregon's not going to be a prime mover in this space, and there's a huge advantage to looking south of us down into California and around the world to see where we can learn lessons, watch those mature, understand how will the engineering questions, research needs change as those regions move forward with their own goals. One thing, just before we get to the first bullet point here, is, there's a lot of, when folks often think around floating offshore wind, they're like, well, the big turbine, the big blades, what's happening there? Every time there's a news release, someone's developed or releasing a bigger one. But there's a huge effort within the sector to standardize, to sort of select a size and to start to build economies of scale around that. So there's a huge effort ongoing there. I don't think it's a place where Oregon can particularly play. That's where the OEMs, the large multinationals, are going to spend their effort, is how do they standardize, how do they drive forward with less variability in the turbine. However, The other side of this technology is the floater, the platform that the turbine and the tower are connected to. And I think there's a huge opportunity in the development and comparative analysis between some of these novel platform designs that are coming out. At this stage, it's really taking a platform from the oil and gas sector, taking a wind turbine from the terrestrial wind sector, and they've been bolted together. So as you look to start to co-design these and come up with innovative technologies that integrate the dynamics of these two independently designed systems, there's going to be needs to develop novel platforms. And those are probably going to be somewhat representative of Oregon's ports, Oregon's offshore wave conditions, and Oregon's supply chain to support that. So there's definitely an engineering question there. And as we get towards that, the other thing that hasn't happened in the sector is they haven't gone out to the depths that the previously identified wind lease areas, I hope I get the terminology right there, were at the depths where we're sort of out at 1,000 meters. So there's definitely need to spend more time doing the modeling, the testing, and the field trials of the moorings and the anchors when we're getting out to those sorts of depths to sort of de-risk and drive costs in that one. So those are important things, and those are things where the state can play a role, given the port infrastructure, given the engineering capabilities up and down the West Coast. So it's slightly different from the IP-constrained turbine space. Another part of that is dynamic electrical cables. So again, electrical cables are offshore. They go to oil platforms, they go to other things, but floating offshore wind systems are going to be moving a lot more. They're a lot more dynamic in their motions. And the cables that hang off of those, interconnect them out at sea. There's a lot of research that needs to be done in de-risking those, proving that they don't have environmental impacts, that don't impact fish species, benthic species, that sort of thing. So there's definitely space and needs in that dynamic cable environment. Fortunately, there are players playing in that. The California Energy Commission is funding some work there. PNNL and the National Lab Infrastructure is doing some work there. But I think there can be work specific to Oregon that can sort of be a bolt-on incremental value to that work. Kind of talking to what Bill was talking about, what is the contribution of offshore wind to decarbonization goals? But beyond that, what does it do for grid reliability, grid resilience, particularly when we start to look at emerging high impact events? These are sort of wildfires, these are floods, these are sort of these low occurrence, high impact, high cost events, and whether offshore wind has a value proposition to play in that. It often comes up, but I think it needs to be quantified in order to help decision making. Development of the offshore wind sector is going to be $1 billion investment, multi-billion-dollar investment. Ports play an incredibly important part of that. If it gets to scale, even just in California, there's not going to be enough ports in California to service this. So a port-driven initiative to do engineering studies to understand what you need in terms of cranes, quay walls, channel dimensions for specific ports to support specific parts of the supply chain, I think will be valuable, so that individual ports along the Oregon coast can identify an economic opportunity that's appropriate for their resources, for their basin, for their channels, and that sort of thing. I think it'll help bring a bit more specificity to that. One interesting thing that I thought came up is that the vessels and the supply chain for floating offshore wind, the at-sea infrastructure, is actually generally smaller than bottom fixed wind, because everything's built in port and then dragged out. So it may have a better alignment with the smaller vessels that exist in the state. There's a huge amount of additional value in looking at pilot demonstrations of autonomous monitoring and measurement systems, so underwater vehicles, drones, ways of collecting data at sea in an autonomous way and maintaining reliability of these devices without requiring vessels and humans to go out in dangerous conditions. So how can we do this autonomously? How can we monitor? I think overarching the message I got from all the folks I reached out to around this was that the focus is shifting into this industrialization, is how do they scale up? How do they drive economies of scale down? Everything was built as a one-off at this stage of the industry's development. So in the engineering challenges is how do they move beyond a one-off and start to make multiples of that? So I think in that vein, there are a lot of the international research community, the supply chain community, the companies engaged in this are working hard. I think Oregon can partner up with a lot of those folks to find a lot of answers to the questions they have here.
Great. Thank you so much, Bryson. You can see quite a lot, and these are just a select number of the research needs we identified. There are additional ones in the report, in the executive summary, which you can reference. There may even be more. I'm sure there are more beyond what we've identified, but this is a good starting place. Let's see. I would like to go to the next slide. We're just gonna ask Selena to just review a little bit the last piece of the report. This will just take a minute or two, and then we'll be able to enter into discussion. So Selena, maybe you want to talk about our how we compiled references and resources and new
thanks. Each section of the report has references, and those are presented in the bibliography of the report. But I was, and in our conversations that the stack had, what we recognized was that a lot of the literature that's out there is somewhat speculative rather than empirically based, actually going out to floating platforms and collecting data, right? And so we, especially on biological effects, which we have a lot of expertise on in the stack, did a little bit of extra work looking for information on where people actually measured changes in biodiversity and so on and so forth. Like I said, the first floating farms were only really operational since 2017. So there hasn't been a lot of time to collect a lot of data yet. The literature when you go searching for literature on this topic, it's just going through the roof right now. And so it'll be important to do this process of finding more recent empirically based data collection on what has happened at wind farms, floating wind farms, when, if the number of years from now, when we're actually ready to embark on, evaluation of what they might look like in Oregon. But we did compile quite a few references that may help with some of this. So those are included in the report, and they're topically organized into biodiversity, fish, birds, and mammals, planning and monitoring strategies, and ecological impacts.
Okay, great. Thanks, Selena. I wanted to come back to the charge that OPAC gave us, because here's where we confess. We didn't actually get to all 4 parts of the charge. The report fully covers the first 2 parts. The crosswalking with other questions raised in other fora has not happened yet, but we have a recommendation about that. And so we were not able to apply sort of this, research prioritization framework that we presented on earlier to that collection of questions. There are questions on effects and things that are coming out of the roadmap. There were questions that came out of public comment. There were questions that came out of the informal roadmap that was done prior to the state official roadmap. A variety of fora where, in one area that I know that everybody's interested in is sort of like, how do you assess the visual resources and what those, so there's, and I know that's a question that folks have, and there's others with expertise. We didn't have that on our group. So just acknowledging that we have a recommendation about how to address those additional pieces, which would be perhaps once the roadmap is out, we might be able to form a small joint working group. And I'm thinking specifically of maybe a few folks from the stack, from the roadmap roundtable. And there was an OPAC working group as well that looked at Territorial Sea Plan and some things. So, and that we might compile our questions together or research needs, and then perhaps ask the stack to just go through those and see how the framework, what it comes up with. Might be sort of a trial run to get a sense of how it works and to get a better sense of the full breadth of questions that have been raised in research needs. So that's a suggestion that we have. for your consideration, and we are happy to take questions and discuss with you anything you may want to ask us. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Karina and Will, Jim, Selena, Bill, and Bryson. That was fantastic. And I didn't read the full report yet, but I'm looking forward to it because I think, at least for me, that will answer a lot of questions or point me in a direction that it's just very helpful. So questions. We have Joe followed by Natalia.
Yeah, thanks, Karina and everybody on Stack. Really appreciate all the time you put into it. I know it's probably extra on everything else you're doing in a short time frame, so really appreciate the work. I have, I guess, two questions. One is for the prioritization. Maybe I didn't hear it, but is that was just done as a test? There's only a few examples done, and then is the goal to now form this work group and maybe do a more exhaustive.
Correct. We did not apply it. We just kind of, Will ran through the two examples just so that people could kind of get a sense of how it would work. And the idea was that we would have, we've been compiling questions in the background that we've been seeing coming up in different groups and stuff, but that work just has not been completed, and we don't have the full set that we would, want to perhaps run through it. So that's kind of where it's at. And I guess the other thing, and Will maybe could comment a bit more on this, because I think I shared with him some of the questions that I had compiled from various fora, and some of the questions are legitimate. They are interests of people. They may there may not be information to answer them, but sometimes if you're going to structure a research project, the way a question is asked can be really important. And when they come from public fora, they don't always have the structure. And so there might be some work with this joint work group that could help restructure some of those questions so that they were maybe more well matched. And Will, I might offer an opportunity for you to comment on that if you'd like, or anyone else, but just because we talked about it.
I think that's right, Karina. And when we were looking at some of the examples that you had collected, I think we encountered that exact problem, that it was like, this question is not posed very well, and it's hard to know how to put it through the framework. So that's something to think about, that there could be some guidance in creating the questions that would then be fed into this.
Yeah.
Great. And then a second question, I like that format, the little rubric you had. I think it makes sense. The other question was, maybe if Jeff is still there, I'm not sure. I just wanted to get a sense of, for the larger roadmap process, how this will be incorporated in time for the June deadline, or maybe you can answer that too, Karina. I don't know if you've talked to Jeff already about that, but I'm curious just kind of how it gets synthesized into the roadmap.
Well, I could maybe start, we were hoping, and we don't have quorum, so it's not going to happen. We were hoping to get an endorsement of the report. And then I think the idea was to reference it, but I'll let Jeff speak to that.
Yeah. In my ideal world, we would include the report from Stack as an appendix to the roadmap that we put out to the public in a couple of weeks, so that people can start to engage with what's been found and give us feedback and advice on other areas of research interest that we should be including. I'd also like to, in our April 20th roundtable meeting, have a focused discussion about the research work that Stack has done, to start doing some of that crosswalking with the effects table that we put together as a roundtable, where we talked about all the things that we want to know or that we care about, and try to see what topic areas are we seeing not yet covered, and are there any pieces of advice? One example that comes to mind, we have a visual resource expert on our roundtable who has put forward some ideas for research into how to value and classify the visual effects from offshore wind. And in talking with Karina, that was an area where they were looking for expertise to be able to fill out that part. So that's one example where we can start to bring these closer together. But I think it's a fair point that more work needs to be done, both after this report from Stack and after the roundtable, or after the roadmap itself, that we only offer a starter list of the research agenda, but part of that recommendation about building a research collaborative, whether that is a separate entity or whether it's something that works under OPAC or with OPAC, that could be a place to kind of shepherd this research agenda and build it over time, like Selena was talking about, to keep our eyes on the research that's coming out and let this be kind of a living list of research priorities.
Great. Thank you, Jeff and Karina and Joe. I see Natalia followed by Amelia.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Great. Thank you so much, Karina, and all the team for great work. I have two questions. The first one is general. So my understanding, Karina, you mentioned that there will be a section with recommendation, yeah? Because for now, when I'm looking on the outlines or structure, it's everything great, but like I'm missing conclusions and recommendation in the end before the annexes and all this attachment. So my understanding, you plan to incorporate some recommendation at the end. Yes?
I think the main output that is our recommendations is the list of research needs that we identified, which is only in the executive summary. So you may not have seen it if you looked at the earlier version that was shared with the council. And you saw selected elements of it in the presentation. So I think that is the main output that could be used as a recommendation for things to study, but I think really we need to complete the process with the rest of the possible questions coming out of the roadmap, et cetera. And I think then there might be some clearer recommendations of what the priority one would be. Secondly, we were, when we were originally charged, but the charge changed, asked to make recommendations about a research or science entity because California was proposing one. California ended up moving ahead faster than we did because of their needs and their timelines being different. And so I think that's still an open question, although OPAC did change their charge to kind of pull that out of our work on this report. So just because of the way the timing and things happen. But so that's the best that I think I can answer, unless anyone else on the stack would, or in the report team would like to address that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. And when I'm thinking about recommendation, I try to connect, yes, we have this research needs for offshore wind energy, but also at the policy level, at the state level, so many parallel actions going, for example, energy strategy.
Your volume just went way down. I don't know if that's the same for everybody, but I'm actually having a hard time hearing your question.
Can you hear me now? Maybe I should talk loudly.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just changed.
Can everyone else
There.
hear me?
That's better.
Well, okay. So I'm thinking about recommendations. So we have this research needs, yes, for offshore wind. But I'm also thinking about more broader to incorporation in how those research gaps can be connected and incorporated to the policy development, or how they can be benefit future policy implementation or updates. And I'm thinking about recent energy strategy. Yes, because you have a section about, what is that section? Economic competitiveness for offshore wind, and you use the global IRENA table, but there is also our local table from energy strategy. So how that could be connected. Also, I'm thinking about in December was approved Oregon, what is disaster recovery plan, which is also a section about economic recovery that could be offshore wind, and the commissioner mentioned data center as well. There is separate task force for that. And there is infrastructure, resilience infrastructure recovery, those things. Yeah, and I'm thinking about new government executive orders about climate resilience and renewable energy. So that I think like broader, it would be really great to see as part of the recommendations in the end, very brief or table just, here is the research gaps. And yes, we need to work on that. We need funding, we need to cooperate regionally. But if we are covering these gaps, here is how it could help to implement, for example, climate resilience, how policy, yes, in terms of policy implementation. So that would be great. Yeah, thank you so much. And I have second question to Brian, I think.
Yeah, and I appreciate the recommendation, and since we're, we can potentially address some of that in the conclusions section. I don't know how well developed we can do it with the given the effort and time available, but I agree with you, that would be incredibly useful.
And I mean, even in general, just briefly,
Yeah.
you don't need to go deeply because it can help with funding during the legislation session.
Yep. Yeah, I get it. Thank you for that. That's helpful. Bill, I don't know, because it was on I was on economic topics. Did you want to respond at all?
No, I think digging into the economics and local estimates of the economics of offshore wind versus the evidence that we compiled on short notice to put into the document. Yeah, a lot more detailed study and analysis would be very useful, and that would take some time and some
resources.
Effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have another question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have to Brian about dynamic cables he mentioned.
Oh, Bryson, yeah.
Oh, Bryson, oh, sorry. Yeah, I cannot see on the screen. Yeah, so I'm wondering, there is a mention research, development, and testing dynamic cables for depths relevant to Oregon. So my question, is it only the gap, or do you plan that research only to discover the behavior in how the dynamic cable, the best way to do that in terms of depths? Or there is also reliability in the cable joint area. So let's say dynamic cables, we have these dynamic cables, they're coming from the platform and they are moving constantly. And then on the seabed, at some point, dynamic cable attached to the power cables that could be buried under seabed or may not, and they attach through the joint. And we have this situation when the upper body is constantly moving, and power cables don't like that because it's electricity and water. And then we have kind of stable on the seabed. So the problem when I attended Oceanic Network for Offshore Wind last year in Virginia, this is a big and risk assessment needed here in the area of joint. How we can make, because this is where a lot of catastrophe happen, in that joint area where the connection happen between dynamic and stable cable. So I'm wondering if that research or gaps that will be covering there also will address that part of activity as well. Because it's again, we have more deep water and it's different pressure. So that's more pressure actually on that area. So I'm wondering how it could be connected or if you plan to cover that. Thank you. And I'm done with my questions. Great job, thanks.
Sure. Should I quick response, Karina? Okay. Yeah, no, definitely is a question. The connectors as well as the cables. It seemed like from the input I got, the connectors are under a lot of R&D from some of the big connector manufacturers. Of course, the connection at the seafloor is a little less dynamic because you have a lot of attenuation of the motion between the surface and the seafloor. So at the seafloor, it is a lot nicer environment. But they're also a very expensive part of this whole chain of conversion. And they are on the seafloor, so you want them to be reliable. You don't want to be picking them up and dropping them down. But my understanding from the input I got was that some of the cable connector companies feel a lot more comfortable about that aspect than the topside dynamic motion of the cable. And they felt like that's where more innovation could occur that includes industry national labs, universities across the sort of supply chain, as opposed to like just an equipment manufacturer question. But yes, both are a question that needs work.
Cool. Thank you. Natalia, did you have another one or was that it?
No, that
It
was
was-
just
okay.
two.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amelia, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. First, thank you all so much for what I can only imagine is a huge effort and time to answer these big picture questions, which are incredibly complicated. I guess I was curious if there's some sort of timeline to move onto or to start incorporating more specific questions that might include like nearshore impacts or specific community or site impacts, looking at the specific areas, or how long you intend to kind of incorporate these big picture questions first, and then is there different timeframes to move to those more specific economic or site specific questions? Does that make any sense? Sorry. Thank you again.
I put myself off. Yeah, I mean, I think that, if we, without a plan of where or what is going to be happening, yes, I think that it's hard to identify specific local effects that you want to look into. But certainly, I think, if there was a specific plan in place, those would make sense. And I would open that up to the stack for any other feedback on that point.
Well, from the biological resource side of things, it matters a lot where the sites are. And I know we have these big chunks of ocean that are like possible places, but what habitat is there, and there's a lot of details that are hard to answer until we know more about the specifics of what's being proposed.
Okay. Amelia, did that answer your question?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. We need a specific proposal to start incorporating nearshore impacts or economic impacts and even biological. So
yeah, because otherwise
Thank
you're
you
you're
again.
researching the whole coast, right? It's just a little, right? I get it. I get the need and the interest for sure. But yeah, we don't have that much resource available. I mean, I think the scientists would love to continue, go do lots of studies, but not sure it's a good use of funds.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I mean, we kind of already went into our 3:15 agenda item, which is OPAC deliberation and recommendations about both the stack report and the offshore wind roadmap update. But other questions for the presenters or other discussion about where we want to go with these, or any thoughts like that? Andy?
Yeah, thank you. I too want to thank the stack and Karina for all of the work you've done to work with your colleagues and pull this together. I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is the next steps on this, and really trying to nail down what that might look like, because I think that the roadmap has identified kind of one filter to look at this issue through, and your report has identified another. And I'm thinking that there might be value in a workshop or a series of meetings where that work is done. And my question is, I guess, on the process end of that, is this something that we think could be accomplished in a workshop where you spend a concentrated period of time, or is this something that might take a little bit longer and have more regularity? So there would need to be kind of more of a process structure to support the effort. So I'm just curious about kind of how we might approach this next step, because I think that is important for the roadmap, because I think it would be nice to lay out a potential path in the recommendations that we could then all kind of get behind and potentially fundraise for, if it was a discrete effort, or if it needed to be more of an ongoing engagement over a period of a year or two. That might be its own specific project or kind of grant opportunity or contract. So just curious to know what the thoughts are on that process.
And who are you asking?
I guess, Karina, you might be great to start with. I mean, but there might be too much to handle in a concentrated workshop. Although I do recall in the past with marine hydrokinetic energy, there, we had a concentrated workshop that came out with the proceedings where, the actual content of the workshop was to walk through these things in the different subject matter areas. And I think that was something, that BOEM and the National Marine Renewable Energy Center funded in the past. So just trying to get that sense of if this is an event that Oregon could sponsor, like to try and move it forward, or whether or not it's more of that kind of ongoing dialogue and back and forth. So I'd love your perspective on that, but I would welcome any other stack member to, respond if they have thoughts.
I would offer that the way you've described is pretty various possible ways that it could go. And so my recommendation would be, if we have specific outcomes that we would like, or deliverable, or like what do you want to get out of the process, and then design it backwards, then we can figure out what the resources, effort, time it might entail. So for example, connecting or soliciting from agencies what the specific research, policy relevant questions that need research answers to, understanding what those are might be a worthwhile thing to crosswalk with a science team or a research teams who might be able to support that work in the future. And then that, so I could see something like that happening. I don't know. Anyway, other members of the stack, please feel free to weigh in.
Well, I see Commissioner Thompson's raised her hand.
I am not a member of the stack. However, I would love to weigh in. I got to tell you, this is more fun than I've had in a whole long time. I mean, being in the room with the designated smart people, and they're looking at so much that matters now and going forward, it's just really elegant and intelligent and wonderful. I'm connected with the Association of Oregon Counties, and it seems to me that what you're talking about is so widely applicable. I wonder if you'd make a presentation at a policy committee meeting of the Association of Oregon Counties. Right now, it's wrapped up kind of in the legislative session, but in terms of information and implications, to get counties all over Oregon interested and informed about what's going on with this wave energy, this is game-changing information. I'd just like to put in a longer-term effort to link up with that county leadership.
Well, I'm sure we could figure something out along those lines. So I'd have to get back to you and consult with folks, but yeah.
Thank you.
And I see Jeff just put in the chat that, okay, I saw it somewhere. Now I can't find it.
There. Hi.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
wanted
okay.
to let you know, Commissioner Thompson, that I am scheduled to talk with AOC and the lead Oregon cities in March during the public comment period about the roadmap side of it. And then we can, it's all kind of related.
Segue, I'm telling you, that's great. Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions Andy, did that get to what you were thinking about?
I think it's helpful. I'm still noodling in my head as to how to potentially make something like this happen. Wondering about overlap with our science trust and whether or not there might be, something there to help us with this. But I think there's more food for thought than I'm ready to kind of charge forth down a single path on.
Okay, are there other comments or questions from OPAC members? And while I'm waiting for people to raise hands, I just want to remind the public that if, we have a public comment time coming up at 3:45 or after this agenda item is done. So if you'd like to make public comment, please put your name in the chat and let us know that you'd like to speak so we can call on you. And Margaret, thank you for raising your hand.
Yeah, I guess when I saw this on our agenda, I was thinking that maybe we're going to fold in discussion about kind of looking at Jeff's presentation and some of the TSP, timelines. Is that not something we're going to talk about? The TSP revision timeline, what I'm talking about. So I just wanted to fly, are we going to talk about the territorial sea plan and when we might be looking at those updates? Because OPAC obviously will be engaged in that.
Well, I don't want to speak for Jeff in particular, but he did provide the timeline slide that had the broad general, like TSP parts 1 and 2 would be going first ahead of future amendments related to parts 4 and 5. So that, I think, is still our thinking around the right approach for amendments of the territorial sea plan, given not only our kind of coastal program strategy and enhancement goals, but as well as responding.
Yeah,
but maybe I'm not answering the question that you have.
I'm just wondering how that lines up with what OPAC's agenda looks like over the next, few years, and how we're going to sync that up, and like when we're going to maybe plan some working groups, and when we're going to be at the approval stages, and that kind of calendar, what that looks like. I thought maybe we would just start talking about that, or maybe that's not what we had planned to talk about. But when I saw that flag, I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna, regarding offshore wind energy roadmap, and I was like, oh, we're gonna talk about that timeline that Jeff presented, and then it doesn't seem like we're talking about that. So I just want to say that's what I am pretty interested in, because I want to make sure I'm tuned in, kind of thinking forward when I need to be engaged in reviewing those parts of the TSP.
Okay.
Well, I guess my immediate response to that is I want to ensure that OPAC has an opportunity to provide any comments or support for the roadmap drafts as they are being generated. So I would put that as priority 1 for the council to make sure that if there's something missing or an area that the council would want to emphasize, given that Jeff and his process are moving forward to finalization over the next 5 months on that piece of work, I would urge OPAC to focus on making sure that the recommendations there reflect the council's perspective. And I think at the same time, in April, we could do more of that visioning, which would be describing, potential elements of whether it's additional studies that are completed, like there's a recommendation for a marine spatial planning study. If that was going to happen, I think we would want to do that before we amend part 4 and 5, right? So there's an order of operations that I think is important there. So I guess I would say that our April meeting will be the chance where if you want to take action, provide recommendations, that is provided at that time.
That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, I'm also just like I'm just looking at I'm like Jeff's timeline was like parts 1 and 2 were going to be reviewed first through 2026, which is now, and then into 2027 with LCDC taking an action mid 2027, and OPAC is going to have to make recommendations on those 2 parts of the TSP before it goes to LCDC, right? And so I want to know when we're going to start like kind of gelling and coming to gelling on those 2 parts of the territorial sea plan before that LCDC action, I guess. And just it's just calendaring really. I'm, making sure we have that on our schedule and we kind of know it's coming and what that scope looks like. And I want to make sure we talk about that sometime, but maybe that's EC. I could just pass it on to the EC. You guys can talk about it next and think about how that fits into the next agenda. And then hopefully you won't punish me by nominating me for the EC.
Oh, now you put a target on you, Margaret, I swear. Just kidding. But yeah, I think that I was looking at, we can talk about that again after public comment, but April might be we need to come up with topics for our April meeting anyway. So I think that would be an appropriate time. So, any other comments or questions from OPAC regarding the presentation by Karina and her crew and the stack, or from Jeff? And any thoughts about those things moving forward? Last call before we move into public comment. Okay, I'm not seeing any, but I'm also not seeing any public comment. So just again, if you want to provide public comment to OPAC, we're glad you're here and we'd like to hear from you. So please put your name in the chat and let us know. And we'll call on you. But unless I'm missing anything, I don't see anything in the chat. Do you, Andy?
No, I do not see anybody asking to provide public comment.
Okay. Okay, in that case, I guess we just made up the time on our schedule. And we could move into recap, meeting and scheduling and wrap up and deciding on our April dates for our OPAC meeting. So Andy, what do you want to do first? Decide on the dates, or there we go.
Yes. So we are right at a potential quorum for the 2 days that turned out to be have the best availability. And they are April 21st and April 23rd. Now, I am hopeful we can get another OPAC appointment through to give us a little bit more chance for members not to be available. But I am also thinking that we do need to just make a date and try and get folks to be able to attend. And I know I see Nick raised his hand, and he's going to be out of, I think, the country in April. So I'm worried that we may need to actually push this back if we can't get a quorum, even through the scheduling poll. So that's kind of where we are. And if it's helpful, I can send around that link again for people to amend their existing response. But it has been a challenge. So, if you, when you see those emails come through, please respond to the scheduling poll so that we can get our date nailed down and plan as best we can.
Hey, Andy, I know that Susan has talked to Rex Leach and he was interested in being part of OPAC. I think, Susan, you've talked to him, correct?
I talked to him briefly, but I need to follow up with a phone call and talk to him more about it. Yes.
Okay. I'm just trying to think to get you guys a quorum. Don't have to.
Yep.
I have a good excuse. We're going to Barcelona, and we're looking at the Dungeness Crab Commission, looking for volunteers to hand out crab. Anybody wants to go?
Thanks, Nick. Andy, so the April meeting, do we know yet if that will be in person or it will probably be virtual again?
Because of our agency budget challenges, I'm thinking that this is going to have to be in a virtual setting again.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do see Commissioner Thompson indicating that April 23rd is an LCDC meeting.
Right.
So.
Whoops. Sorry. And if I recall, the 20th is roadmap.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So the 21st would be right after that.
Yep.
I don't know if that's better or not. Margaret.
Just to try to keep things moving, it sounds like it's going to be hard if you're on the roadmap and OPAC for the 21st. But, if the 23rd is an LCDC meeting, I'm not sure we want to overlap with that. I am good with moving forward with one of these dates, just so that we can schedule it, and maybe it's early enough. We're in January still, believe it or not. So maybe we can actually either recruit more people and or convince people to come, especially if it is going to be virtual, if we need that quorum. That's my preference, and I just want to state that so that we don't get too caught in an eddy here.
That sounds good. My preference would be for the 21st. I mean, I don't think either one of them are ideal, but if there is an LCDC meeting on the 23rd, that might provide some tough times for Andy or other DLCD.
Well, it would certainly mean that Steve Shipsey is occupied because he
Oh,
staffs
yeah.
the LCDC meeting.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they changed the Parks Commission meeting to the 21st, so I'm
Oh, no.
gonna be scrambling.
Hmm.
But sometimes that's just a work session day. So if that's the case, I could do this and that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, it sounds like, I mean,
Good.
I would lean towards the 21st
Mhm.
anyways. So maybe we should set it for the 21st and work on recruitment, and we can check in closer to the meeting. And if it had to be postponed, then maybe I should look at even scheduling a date at a time further out, like early May, as a plan B. But I would love to keep this in April. Though,
That's why we
because
need to meet our legal requirements for the meeting. So yeah,
Correct.
I would rather keep it there if we can. Okay. Okay, well, yeah, that sounds good. Let's try for April 21st. But I don't know when, if Tara put in the chat, when is the next opportunity for nomination and confirmations?
that really does depend upon the position that's being filled. Because
Okay.
of OPAC statutory language, some of the positions require Senate approval, and some are different. Like the county seats require county support and then a governor appointment.
Right.
So that one doesn't, I think, have to go through the Senate rules.
Okay.
But I think April is early April is a time for nominations, or the Senate rules, I believe.
Okay. Okay, so we will try to get some people to fill the empty seats. And we're planning for April 21st.
Do we want to pull up those 3 seats, or do we know them? Does everybody know them? And then there's the 3 empty seats, and then there's the seats to replace. I don't know if Susan, you're hoping to get out of here by April, but like, then there's the seats that are termed out that maybe people are gonna try to find somebody in April. There's 4 of those, right? Is that what I understood?
So I think we need an executive committee action to send out another letter announcing a call for nominations for new OPAC members.
Okay.
And I will list all of the seats that we are looking to fill. That way there's a discrete set of spots that we are doing outreach on. But I would appreciate help with outreach, and if you identify people who are interested, I'm happy to chat with them and work with them.
Okay. Yeah, so I see 3 voting seats, or let's see, 4. Mine is up after April. It's up in June. Charter, sport, fishing, recreation from the North Coast. Coos, Curry, Douglas, and Lane Counties representative. And commercial ocean, North Coast. I missed one.
And rec North Coast. So there's both fishing seats on the North Coast.
Oh, okay.
I think actually both fishing seats on the South Coast with a replacement for you.
And for Richard.
I do have a nominee for the South counties that I will be acting on.
Okay.
And I think there may be one more that I'm not calling off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So I will take that action item and work with the executive committee to draft a letter with those seats, and we can send out an announcement, and I will also try and be even more proactive in searching for replacements.
Sounds good. Okay, do we want to talk about anything for the April meeting schedule? Or do you want just the executive committee to work on that? Karina.
I guess I'm interjecting a slightly different topic. I'm not clear, and OPAC will need to decide what it wants to do with the report. I know we heard some feedback. We could probably, work on that, but like, what's the timeline for that if it's going to connect, if Jeff wants to include it as an appendix? So that's a pending kind of hanging business item, and I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe we talk about an executive committee, but I just wanted to flag that needs to be resolved.
And I guess my question about that is, if we need a vote on it, we're gonna have to wait until April. Voter consensus on it. But I don't know if that rises to the level of needing a consensus approval for that. I guess that question is to Steve and Andy.
I think as a work product of STAC, it can stand on its own right now. And Jeff can reference it as an appendix. As to whether or not there's anything to add or any comments from OPAC receiving the report, that's a great question. I don't know how the council wants to kind of officially adopt that or bless that, or what term I would use even.
Right. Well, I'm thinking that, I mean, we obviously talked about it at this meeting as part of the video record. It'll be part of the meeting recap text. But if there's some things that we asked Stack, or that Stack wants to do to add a little bit more to it before it's final, I think we can do that and finalize adopting it in April. Does that sound like an avenue?
That's what I was thinking, because the roadmap is still draft, right? It's going out for public comment. So this could remain draft, and we could tinker on some of the things that we heard today and then finalize it April, and then it can go together.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay. Yeah.
And you would be within the statutory authority to make recommendations to state agencies. Stack can do that, and in this case, the wind map is a state agency product from DLCD, so we're okay that way.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you, Steve. Okay, and I guess if Jeff is still on, Jeff, does that work with your timeline? Just to make sure. Sorry to put you on the spot, but
yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think including the draft in our draft and marking that it's a draft and that it's, going to be further discussed by the roundtable, but we're interested in public input in it as well, I think is a good way to go.
Okay. As long as our schedules, as long as one schedule doesn't hold up the other or whatever, I just want to make sure. Okay, perfect. Okay, so are we good to go on that part of it, Andy, Karina?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Karina. Andy, what else do we need to talk about?
Well, I guess, should we hold the 21st and set that on the calendar and only change that if when we get closer it's clear we're not going to have a quorum? That would be I think the last kind of thing we want to make sure that
would be my
today.
preference, but I'm not sure about the other OPAC members. And my preference is for that because I know it'll be right after the roadmap meeting, but some of that offshore wind stuff will be fresh in our minds when we talk about that at OPAC.
Mm-hmm.
The 23rd has a conflict and we won't have Steve Shipsey, and we might be able to get him for part of the day on the 21st. So that's why I would prefer the 21st, but open to other thoughts and ideas about that.
I'm comfortable with that approach.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's put it on your calendars for the 21st, and we will actively recruit for new members.
Yep. And sorry we've run over today, but
yeah.
I think we're done, right, Susan?
Yeah, I just want to note that Andy is going to work on the oh my God, my brain is dead. Elections and executive committee process too. So we will work on that between now and April. So
yep, I've got some follow-up actions that are urgent, so I will be reaching out to the executive committee soon.
Okay. Anything else for the good of OPAC from anybody? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Appreciate you all taking the time today. We had some good information, and we're running over, so I will let you go right now, but thank you all very much.
Thank you
Good
all.
to see you guys.
Thank you all. Thanks, Susan.
Thanks.
Bye.